Well, hello and welcome to another video by Financial Learning. On today's video, we're going to take a look at CleanSpark Inc.'s April mining numbers. The month of April has come to a close, and with that, we can get a good look and understand just how much revenue the company made and what that profit margin comes out at. Also, we're going to look at the global hash rate to see how that impacted the daily Bitcoin mining amount, as well as the cost to mine Bitcoin from an energy use perspective. So we're going to take a look at all of that, as well as how much Bitcoin I believe they would have sold in order to cover the cost of the monthly operations. So without further ado, let's get right into it. All right, and starting on the left-hand side, this is the information from CleanSpark's public Bitcoin mining wallet. You can see I do have two of these rows highlighted yellow, and those are actually significant amount of Bitcoin that was moved in and out of the wallet on those specific days. Now, there has been some speculation as to what that movement is for. Some people have even tied that transaction with the Coinbase line of credit. So I will be interested to see if CleanSpark does comment on exactly what they have done with this amount of Bitcoin that has been shuffled in and out of the public wallet. Maybe they'll provide that on this next press release. I guess we'll have to wait and see. But moving on, I want to take a look at that bolded April 2nd date. That is going to be the highest amount of daily Bitcoin mined for the month of April. We'll go into just exactly what occurred and why we had a slowdown on the amount of Bitcoin mined compared to previous months in just a minute. But before we do, let's take a look at that average Bitcoin mined each day. And it came out at 21.0610 Bitcoin. And the average price of Bitcoin mined each day in the month of April came in at $86,583.58. And you will also notice I do have a yellow column for the global hash rate. I did track that each day based on a meme pool website, and I will share that meme pool link in the description of this video. And you can see based off of those daily global hash rates, I do have the average hash rate coming in at 869.37, and this would be in exahash per second. I'll explain exactly why I have been looking at that number in a little bit on the next slide. But before we do, let's take a look at the monthly mining amount. So total amount mined in the month of April was 631.8311 Bitcoin for a total revenue amount of $54,706,197.44. Now, I do have the March HODL amount listed here, and you can see that based on this March Bitcoin mining update that they provided on the last press release. Also, I do have an estimated Bitcoin sold of 408 Bitcoin for the month of April. I'll explain why I chose this number in a little bit when we start looking over some of the profit margins and then estimated HODL total. So taking that March monthly amount and then adding the remaining Bitcoin that was not sold for the month of April, I have them coming in at 12,092 Bitcoin. And you can see that has a total HODL value of $1,173,500,437. And that's based off of the last price of Bitcoin, which was at $97,043. So we have seen the price of Bitcoin start to move back up, and it's getting close to that $100,000 per Bitcoin amount. So with that price movement, you will expect to see the global hash rate continue to increase as there is more profitability for some of those less efficient miners. So based on all that, I'd like to then talk about the impact of the global hash rate as well as start to look at that profit margin and the monthly cost. So let's jump over to that now. All right, so before we talk about the cash flow amount or the profit margin, I did want to talk about one of the other factors that will impact the overall cost to mine the Bitcoin, and that's going to be global hash rate. So if you look at the top left, you're going to see a graph, and I have the time frame broken out for March and April, and there's three different lines here. There is the daily global hash rate, there's also the moving average for that hash rate, and then there is the level of difficulty. Looking first at the moving average, you can see that when you compare the month of March to the month of April, there was an increase on that moving average amount. So that is going to be impacting just how much these Bitcoin miners are able to mine on their daily. And that's because their market share is changing as that global hash rate is increasing. And then on top of that, look at the level of difficulty. There were two significant step ups in the month of April for level of difficulty. And speaking of level of difficulty, there will be a drop after about the first week or so in May. And last time I looked, the estimate was about a 5% drop in terms of level of difficulty. So, with that being said, I do believe we will start to see some more 22 Bitcoin mine each day with this difficulty shifting. And then the only other thing that would still impact would be if that global hash rate does end up reversing and start to go back up again for that moving average amount. So, definitely keep your eyes posted on that. And we should be getting an update from CleanSpark in terms of just how much hash rate they're currently operating at. Last disclosure was 42.4 exahash per second, and we had that fleet efficiency as well in the 17s. So with those two pieces of information, as well as the global hash rate, I'm able to calculate just what the energy cost to mine the Bitcoin comes out at. So moving down into that, you can see that I do have that Bitcoin calculator down on the left-hand side, and that does help me calculate that cost to mine. You do need that global hash rate amount. You also need the efficiency of the miners. And in CleanSpark's perspective, they were at 17.03. And then the last item you need to know is what is the average power cost in terms of dollars per kilowatt hour. So with those three items, you're able to get a pretty good estimate as to what the cost to mine Bitcoin in terms of energy came out at. And I currently have that sitting at $37,591. So let's take a look. When you look at the table, you're going to see I do have without depreciation and with depreciation. I'm going to focus most of my attention and efforts on the without depreciation line, but just to recall, the depreciation amount does help the company in terms of some write-offs so that they don't have to get hit with as much of income taxes on some of the revenue. And when you're looking at cryptocurrencies, there is a capital gains type of impact. So I think it's important that the company is calculating the depreciation in order to be able to reduce their overall tax burden. And you can see based off of the month-to-date profit margins with depreciation, you can actually see that it is a negative 4.31%, which means if you are subtracting depreciation, there's no need to be able to get taxed on that amount that you're mining. So that is a good thing that CleanSpark is able to do. But I think what's more important if you're an investor is to really look at the EBITDA. So EBITDA is going to be the overall cost that does not include depreciation or taxes or anything of that nature. So when you're just looking at the overall expenses and revenue amount, you can see I do have that here without depreciation. As I mentioned, the energy cost to mine is at $37,591 per Bitcoin, and that gives them a total month to date, and this will be for the entire month of April, cost to mine from an energy perspective at $23,751,580. Now, on top of that, there are the professional fees, payroll fees, and G&A expenses. I do have those listed as well for the month. So you can see rolling those numbers up as well. Total month-to-date cost for the month of April is estimated at $35,354,247. Now, when you subtract their total revenue amount for the month, which was $54,706,197, you're going to see that they were still left with $19,351,000. So still a really nice 35.37% profit margin. Now, the profit margin is important because that allows us to have a good estimate as to just how much of the Bitcoin will be sold versus kept in their treasury. Because CleanSpark did make mention this month in a press release that they do plan on selling a portion of their monthly mining amount in order to cover the cost of operations. So, with that tidbit of information and from what I'm able to estimate on my end, I do have them still able to hold an additional 223.51 Bitcoin for the month of April. So, as I already mentioned, that does get their total Bitcoin treasury amount back up to 12,092 Bitcoin. So, overall, total amount at the end of April would still have them at that $1,173,500,437. So let's look at cash flow now. So looking at that total year-to-date costs without depreciation so far, and this of course would be the energy cost to mine the Bitcoin so far, plus all the payroll, professional fees, and G&A. Total came out at $143,691,534. So take that amount, add to their commitment amount that they mentioned in the last earnings report and that Twin City purchase, you're going to see that after all of those year-to-date costs, the total amount of cash on hand would be $80,013,713. And that is assuming that they are selling the amount of Bitcoin in the month of April to cover that cost. So outside of that 80 million, they still have 200 million from a Coinbase line of credit. And as I mentioned earlier on the video, some people are thinking that CleanSpark is using some of their Bitcoin treasury as collateral in order to be able to get some of that cash from that Coinbase line of credit to maybe do some additional purchases, maybe some additional CapEx expenses. We're just not sure, but it was interesting that they tapped into that, seeing as they still have about $80 million available cash on hand. All right, and just to recap a couple things that I just covered, we did see that CleanSpark was still able to increase their treasury amount. They have it up to about 12,092 Bitcoin, and that's assuming that they did sell the amount of Bitcoin that they would need in order to cover the cost of operations, both from an energy side of things as well as on their payroll, G&A, and professional fees. So looking at all that, they still had a very healthy profit margin of 35%. That is how they're able to increase that treasury amount. So that treasury is still looking very healthy at over $1 billion, specifically 1,173,000,000. And that is because the price of Bitcoin has still been chopping upward. We're seeing it hitting that $97,000 per Bitcoin amount. And I would not be surprised to see it hit $100,000 again. Not financial advice. I have just been seeing a lot of different entities, a lot of different companies actually disclosing that they are or have already purchased Bitcoin. So the demand for Bitcoin continues to increase. We have seen companies like MicroStrategy state that they do plan to buy additional Bitcoin and they have active ATMs using shareholder equity in order to generate additional capital to make those spot Bitcoin purchases. So all of that does help CleanSpark if you think about it, because as the price of Bitcoin continues to run up, their profit margins continue to increase and they're able to still stack the Bitcoin on their treasury amount. So, all in all, I think it was a successful month for CleanSpark. I would love to see their update and get a better idea about efficiency and what type of hash rate they have. Looking forward to that press release coming out in just a couple days. So, if you like this video, consider giving it a like, subscribe to my channel if you haven't already, and drop a comment. Let me know your thoughts about CleanSpark's April mining numbers. Do you think they'll hit that 22 daily Bitcoin mining amount again in the month of May? And then what is your opinion on their new strategy of selling some of their Bitcoin in order to cover the monthly cost to mine the Bitcoin? Love to get your thoughts and opinion on that as well. And with all that said, hope you all have a great rest of the day. Keep calm, hash on, and I'll see you on the next one.